City Council on Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all for coming to the first council meeting of the year. I just want to say, if I mess up on some of the wording, I'm not very formal in a lot of things that I do, so I have Councilman Maroney here to help me. But no, I just want to thank you guys, and I want to start out first by kind of giving the council members a chance to talk about what they see for 2023. So Councilwoman Ball, do you want to go ahead and...
Yeah, I'm not prepared to speak to what I plan for 2023, I guess. So I don't have anything on the list. So I guess I'll just say I'll take the things as they come, and I'm sure we'll be busy just reviewing a lot of the things that we've already started and seeing if we're going to move forward with those, which include, renovations to the City Hall, the Bushman Road project, short-term rentals. Getting to know all the new city council members will be a big part of the year, I think, and the mayor. And so I look forward to that as well.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. There's some overlap to the comments I have that Rebecca made. There's a lot of projects that we have this year. 3 of them, Mayor Zierden requested a discussion on tonight's agenda, being the revision of city ordinances, discussion of the County Road 11 trail, and then to reestablish the EDA. Also, as Rebecca mentioned, there's, Bushman Road, the rollout of the new short-term rental license that went into effect January 1st. And it's crucial that we get resident input to help us make decisions, on these issues. And thanks again.
Councilman Maroney?
Yeah, just welcome to 2023, and again, catching me off guard on what we're talking about, but I don't think anything has not been said except for website. We've got a new website in development, but a lot of agenda items on the board that we've been discussing in the past, and so looking forward to learning the new council and having a good year.
Councilman Scott?
Well, good evening. I'm not someone who is good at wearing headsets, so if people are having a hard time hearing me, let me know and I can adjust the microphone. First, just want to start by saying that I appreciate the community support. Those that voted for me, I'd like to think that a lot of it was due to the fact that I think I bring a perspective and an approach to things that really is rooted in being fairly conservative fiscally. And I think for this upcoming year, what people can expect from me is a lot of questions being asked, a lot of discussions hopefully being initiated around what we're taking on in the community and how it serves the community's interest, or in some cases how it doesn't serve the community's interest. So looking forward to working with the council and the community at large to really position the city of Breezy Point the best possible in the future. I ran in part because I see the community really being at a crossroads. And you don't grow as a community like Breezy Point is growing to nearly 3,000 in population and keep the things the way they are from a decision-making standpoint when it comes to policy and how the community is engaged. That's what I'm hoping to bring to the council this year and for the next 3 years after this year. So,
Thank you. Thank you. So I decided to run for mayor after meeting with many of the residents in Breezy, and one of the things that I had heard is that they wanted to feel more heard, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that that will happen, especially at the city council meetings. I know that normally we have a lot of discussion on things not on the agenda, but I really do want to expand that. So when we are talking about things and voting things, that on those things that night, that people are able to come and make comments on those before we vote. And so that'll be one thing that I will be focused on. But coming from the state politics side of it, where everything is polarized, the one thing I did learn is that if you want to make change, it starts from your local community and it starts from the grassroots. So I really hope that we can get more people involved and more people to the meetings and to have more input as we continue to help the city grow and be financially stable. And so I'm looking forward to working with everybody this coming year. So thank you guys for coming. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does the council, is there any items that you guys feel need to be removed for further discussion?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would request remove item 4C for further discussion.
And do I have a motion? Motion?
To remove item 4C off the consent agenda.
Okay. Motion, Councilman Scott, and second, Councilman Jensen. Is there any other discussion?
None for me.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Right. So the next item, the open forum. I would like anyone to come up to talk about things not on the agenda, but also if there's anything that you want to let us know what you expect of us this year or the things that you would like to see or goals. I would welcome any of your guys' comments tonight. And if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes and state your name and address, and then
You
also.
okay if I go 5? I know you talked about open communication, and I'm going to need at least 5 minutes, if that's okay.
Well, I will be here afterwards, too.
I'll be quick. Okay, I'll be as quick as I can.
Okay.
Bill Toff, 31877 Green Scene Drive, Breezy Point. First of all, I want to thank all of you for sitting up in those chairs. I've said this before. I mean, you take it from all people at some point in time. I respect that you're willing to do it, so congratulations on being up there. I'm speaking here tonight because I want to be officially put on the agenda for next month. I was allowed one time to be on the agenda last year, and I was denied every other time. And I think that's because the council really did not want to hear my objections to the disc golf course. Me and my neighbors had a lot of things that were never addressed, and I feel if I get on the agenda that I think with some more open minds on the council, we'll at least get some feedback. I've been waiting for 9 months for numbers from the council and from Pequot Lakes resident, Mr. Humphrey, about what the public good benefit was to the Breezy Point taxpayer. Now, some statements were made that I think were I wish statements and I hope statements. They weren't backed by any facts and research, and they said they would provide that to me last April. As of this point in time, I have not seen one shred of data. I've come up with my own numbers. And quite frankly, I don't see how the disc golf course expansion is going to be able to pay for the maintenance, let alone ever start paying back what it costs to construct that. The only cost I can't come up with is the policing cost. I provided pictorial evidence, 4 separate occasions of alcohol being consumed out of the disc golf course, or the disc golf course that's there now. I also have smelled marijuana. To my knowledge, cannabis isn't legal yet. We all know what this kind of behavior leads to. It leads to loud noise, yelling, and reckless driving. One of my neighbors, a summer and a half ago, in fact, he wrote a letter to the council about it. He was playing with his kids out there. 2 cars screamed by, probably going 45, 50 on Green Scene. He was scared to death. He took his kids in. Last summer, I was driving. I was walking my dog. 2 cars drove by me from the disc golf course, and one lost lane integrity. I wasn't in any danger. I saw it coming and I got in the ditch, but if there had been another car in the other lane, I don't know what would have happened. I did call the police on this, but they're so busy, they can't afford to do anything at that moment. And I know they were from the disc golf course because when you live in a neighborhood for 9 years, you know what cars your neighbors are driving. Plus, that was when they were having that larger tournament they have down on that disc golf course on both occasions. Now, I know some of you up there are going to say, well, we can help pay for this. Maybe we connect it to another event or we have some sort of different type of sales tax we can assess. Why should we have to pay for it twice? I know some of you are going to say, well, it's already 75% complete. Let's just keep it going, see what happens. I got a 30-second story on why that's not a good idea. I had a good friend who had a customer that owed the bank $1.5 million. He wasn't going to be able to make the loan payment, so he went into the bank and said, I need another $250,000 and I can make this all work. He got the $250,000. 6 months later, he declared bankruptcy. 2 weeks later, that loan officer was fired because he wasn't not watching out for the shareholders of that bank. We, the taxpayers of Breezy Point, are the shareholders here. I know you represent us. And I just feel that if you can't show that this has an economic benefit, a common sense benefit, and a benefit that like my 2 grandkids who live on White Overlook Drive, that they're going to be safe in their driveway every weekend day, then I'm hoping that you stop this project where it's at right now. I tell you, I look forward to hearing from you folks next, and I'll go through the appropriate process of signing up to get on the agenda. My neighbors and I have no problem when the money is spent on snow plowing, police, fire trucks, plowing, any of that, because the money is for the Breezy Point residents, and it stays within the community. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
If we proved that it was economically viable and made common sense, would you then have a different opinion on the disc golf course?
If I see the numbers, I mean, I've compiled the numbers myself, and I don't see how it's possible, frankly. But I'm willing to look at your numbers.
Okay.
And you can guarantee me that my grandkids are going to be safe in their front yard also.
All right.
All
Well, I
right.
appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else? Come on up.
I always start out by explaining, as some of you already know, I'm a horrible public speaker. I get very nervous. You'll have to excuse the gum. My mouth goes dry. I hate this, but here I am again. I will second what he said. This business
Address and
about
name.
this business.
Can you state your address and name
Oh,
for the
sorry.
record?
Colleen Couts, 30760 North Lakeview Drive. Sorry. I'll second what he said. This business about, yeah, got 3 minutes, go. Your mind just goes blank. You start rattling everything you can think of. And unfortunately, I think you'll find, like a lot of us have seen, that I'm sure I'll be the second person to stand up here. It's not like we got a whole lineup of people waiting to talk. So I think that, I don't know when that started or if it can be changed, but I think that 3 minutes is a real injustice to the citizens of Breezy Point. Also,
How many
too.
minutes would you want?
You know, I'm not sure. Do you have to say, okay, this amount of time, or?
No, I'm just curious.
Have we ever seen where somebody's gone on for a half an hour? I don't know. I don't know. But I just feel like when you start that 3 minutes, it's like, I'm sure I'm already halfway through it.
Don't worry, I won't cut you off.
The other thing that we've been told in the past is do not repeat. If somebody's made a comment, do not repeat. Well, how are you getting a true indication of what the people are feeling when you've come and now you've been told, you should at least be able to get up and say, hey, I second that. I agree with that. And then the other thing I can ask you, and maybe standing right here I can get an answer. I don't understand this. Why is it that when something's on the agenda, you can't talk about it?
I was not mayor at that time, so I do not know. But
I've always been confused about that. They say, well, if there's something's on the agenda, don't bring it up, and I just don't understand that.
I'd be happy to address that if you'd
Oh,
like.
yeah.
Yeah, so technically in Minnesota state statute, we don't actually even have to have an open forum.
Okay.
So there's no right per se to get up and speak. So going back to the time frame, why 3 minutes? Someone picked a number and it's kind of been done that way. The other reason why why it's encouraged not to speak on open forum on the items that are actually on the agenda is if that's the verbatim item, then the mayor, or whoever's running the meeting, will want to allow those to speak on items. It's not a public hearing, so it's not a mandated thing, but if it's a clause that's on the bottom to say not to speak on it, there should be an available time to actually speak on the item that's actually part of the agenda. So that's just my take on that of what I've learned, but it's all about who runs the meeting to decide that.
Thank you. My other comment is, and I think that this has kind of come up before, and I don't have the answer for this, but over the past year, I spent fighting to maintain the integrity of our residential community with pertaining to the short-term rentals. And I started asking people, just out and about, what do you think about this? And I came back and reported to the council, 90% of the people that I asked had that short-term, what? They had no idea. They had no idea what was going on. I came and informed people over and over and again. People don't know you're doing this. And I don't know the answer. I don't know what the answer is to make them, to inform the people that, but so consequently, like I said, and I'm sure there's a lot of me out there that don't like this public speaking. I invited a lot of these people I talked to, well, not even a lot, but I invited some, sure, show up, come, voice your opinion. Some of them came, some of them stood up, and I think that was at the November meeting. I can tell you what, I felt like we were not addressed very welcomely. It just was not a welcoming environment. I can guarantee you probably all of those people other than myself that came will not return to another meeting just because of how they were addressed. I know you're talking about something about the short-term rental. Can I say anything on it or no?
Go ahead.
The one thing that I think it's fraught with a lot of problems. I was not happy how it was done. It was like, okay, let's do the how-to here and the where months later, and I think you can't separate the two. You can't separate the how-to from the where and vice versa. But it was done very piecemeal and I just don't think it was done very well. I think it's fraught with problems. For an example, the city of Duluth, I don't really have an opinion on Duluth, maybe some of you do, with a total houses, 39,000 houses. Duluth has a cap of 80 short-term rental permits. We have 1,900 houses and we have a cap of 60. To me, that, I don't know where that came from. I think it's not an appropriate number. Like I was saying, apparently there's something else going on further down the line with this short-term rental ordinance. I would propose that there's a possible moratorium put on it for the time being because I don't think it's something that's ready to be implemented, which is very evident, not ready to be implemented and in place. The one thing I've asked all along is so that one house does not get surrounded by these VRBOs, and a lot of communities do this where they'll say 500 feet, you can't have one within 500 feet of another, so that you don't get these large pockets or like I said, a house surrounded by it. I've had the potential for that happening, one on this side, one on this side. Who would ever want to buy my house if I'm sitting between two VRBOs? Then if somebody did want to come in and buy it for an investment, they come to the city and the city goes, we've already given out all 60 permits, you can't get one. You're crippling the homeowner in this regard. So I think there's much more to that ordinance that needs to be worked on and ironed out. I guess that's it. Thank you so much. I'd like to know how many minutes that was. But
I
yeah.
wasn't keeping track, so don't
Thank
worry.
you.
Anybody else?
Jerry Schroden, Breezy Point Timeshare. Mostly in support of what the person ahead of me said. On the online version and on the little paper handout with the agenda on it, in bold at the bottom, it says, for individuals who wish to address the council on subjects that are not part of the meeting agenda. I can respect that, but I'm looking at a council that's got 3 candidates that ran on openness. And for the first packet with those 3 people on the council, that don't need to be there. And I understand why it is there, But then there should be, on all the agenda items, there should be a little thing that says public input. And once in a while it says public hearing, but there are many agenda items where there is not a spot for public input. So most of the other meetings I go to, and I do go to some other governmental meetings, there is an open forum. The 3 minutes is kind of a common thing when there's a lot of people wanting to speak. So that makes a little bit of sense, but that can get dispensed of too. And I very much would appreciate on all other items having a spot for public comment if there's not listed public hearing. Because most of us, our only chance to get to talk to council people is at these meetings. And in the last 24 years, I think I've only missed a handful of meetings. So I try to pay attention.
I can respond to you actually about that. Administrator Chansky and I did talk about that exact thing. And instead of putting it on there, he said it would be up to my discretion. And so I just want to ask you for your patience to allow you to see that our actions will speak louder than our words.
Yeah.
And I plan on absolutely allowing for more public input on those agenda items, even though that is not listed on there right now.
Okay, yes, that's okay, but then it doesn't need to be in bold ink either that I can't talk.
Anybody else? All right. Open forum is now closed. All right, Administrator Chansky, moving on to the reports.
Yes, absolutely, Madam Mayor. So let's go very quickly with the two reports that we have that normally, obviously, that was previously Mayor Rogenkamp and then Councilmember Lillehei were the appointees to the Joint Powers Board and the Planning Commission. So for this meeting, I talked with Mayor Zierden and thought I would just quickly give a brief recap of what happened at the last meetings for those two meetings. The Joint Powers Board did meet in December on the second Monday of the month as they normally do. Not a whole lot on this agenda. They were mainly just approving the elections of the three captains. So under the new Joint Powers Board, the fire district, they've changed up how they appoint officers a little bit. So when it comes to the chief and the assistant chiefs, there's an application period. The board, the personnel committee of the Joint Powers Board reviews those, makes a recommendation, and then the board appoints those positions directly. But then they left the captain's positions to be elected from amongst the firefighters. So they elected Nate Schwankel, Travis Jacobus, and Brad McGuire to serve as the three captains for the Joint Powers, the Pequot Lakes Fire District. And then we just had a short conversation on some new Chief Schwankel just had some questions on the 2023 budget capital plan, some of the policies, making sure that they were already in place, and then discussed with the changes to the adoption of the Joint Powers Board, some changes that might need to happen on the Relief Board as to who is representing the governing entity, in this point, the Joint Powers Board on the Relief Board. So that was really the Joint Powers Board meeting in short. The Planning Commission also met on December 13th. They had one item, an interim use permit application for a home occupation at 8442 Bushman Road from Mr. Brad Thayer. The Planning Commission reviewed that and did issue that home occupation for his small manufacturing operation. The next step for Mr. Thayer is he will be coming to the Planning Commission meeting at a future meeting to get a conditional use permit for the building he will be operating out of. So that, Madam Mayor, is just the two updates on the Joint Powers Board and the Planning Commission.
Great. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the administrator and staff reports for the 2023 organizational structure. Administrator Chansky.
Yes, thank you. Just a moment here. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So again, each year at the first meeting per statute, the City Council has to set some committee appointments and certain designations. That's with the attached resolution does. There are a few items to note as I was working through with Mayor Zierden. Again, the mayor makes nominations and then the council ratifies those nominations. There are a few items in this resolution that still need to have some discussion as well. But first, I'm just going to highlight a few of the items that may have changed, that have changed from previous years. The first one being, in previous years, the city council had department liaisons. That was individual council members that were assigned to individual departments. Those have been removed, as we discussed, and really felt that there wasn't really a purpose for the council department liaisons. Most of them really never did anything. And we also felt that what it did do was potentially invite breaches in organizational chain of command that we wanted to avoid. As always, council is always encouraged that if there is something you would like to, you have a question about, to reach out to me, and then as needed, we'll coordinate with staff, sit down, have a discussion, or I'll just have you directly reach out to that department head who can probably answer a more technical question for you. The finance and personnel committees, those have been separate committees in the past, but on my recommendation, I recommended that we consolidate those into a personnel and finance committee. The main reason being for that is that these two committees kind of really did work in tandem, is that there were very few personnel issues that did not have financial impacts, and a lot of financial impacts had personnel impacts. And so what ended up happening was you have a finance committee meeting meets, then that issue's got to go to the finance committee before it can go to the city council. And so we felt that this is a common practice I've had in other organizations as well, is to just consolidate those committees into one committee. And then the road committee, just redesignated that as a safety and public works committee. The idea there is just to better identify the purpose and designate the purpose of that committee being it's not just roads, but it's kind of all issues pertaining to roads, infrastructures, facilities, and general public safety. So those are kind of the major changes you will see in the resolution. There are 3 items, again, that I mentioned that we are looking for some direction from the council this evening prior to adopting the attached resolution. The first, and I'll hand this over to the mayor in just a moment, Mayor Zierden has proposed changing the council's meeting time from its current 7 p.m., so I know she would like you to discuss that. Staff, we are requesting that the Personnel and Finance Committee, as well as the Safety and Public Works Committees, set a fixed meeting dates and times, so pick a day of the month and a time on that day that you would have a fixed meeting date. It just benefits us right now. Right now, they kind of meet as needed. The issues we have is when a topic comes up, we kind of have to track down the members of the committee. Hey, when can you meet? And it's just a little more easy just to say you're going to meet at this time. If we don't have a reason to meet, we can just say we have nothing to meet or discuss. It allows you just to put it on your calendars, and it's also a little more transparent to the public as to when those committees are meeting as well. And then the last thing is that Mayor Zierden is requesting the council consider expanding the park board from 5 members to 7 members. So with that, Madam Mayor, I will hand it back to you and the City Council for discussion.
Who wants to start to address some of these things?
Is it something you're going to ask public input on first? That's up to you. That you
Probably
you
not on
mentioned
this
it.
one, yep, not
Okay.
on this one.
I'll make some comments. As far as asking about the start time, I like 7 p.m. For the last number of years, 7 p.m. seems to work majority of the time. With young kids, it may take me off the ball field, coaching the kids, away from basketball. But 7 p.m. seems to be a good time when sticking with that Monday. That's for me. So I don't know if you want to address all these things at once or start with
Yeah, we'll
action
start
item
with the
1.
first one. Councilman Scott?
I can go with either 7 or 6. In a lot of respects, I would probably prefer more of an earlier start. I think for some of the public, it might be in certain ways a little easier with an earlier start for them to attend. Some might be just, coming off from work and would be able to stop in, where once you get home and involved in other things, it could be a little bit more difficult with a 7 o'clock start. So I guess I'm open to either times, but would probably lean myself and prefer more of a 6 p.m.
Councilman Ball?
Before I guess, did you have a time in mind, or were you just,
We had discussed potentially 6, but if it were 6:30, I mean, I think it's kind of open.
okay. Yeah, I mean, we've done 6 in the summer before. We've done 7. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter. Either one, I have kids and none of the times are gonna be perfect. So as long as somebody's at home when I leave, then we're good. But
I would prefer an earlier start time, 6 or 6:30. I think, what is it, Pequot does it at 6, I believe, and then Nisswa and Cross Lake do it at 7, but I do prefer an earlier start myself as well, especially if there's a lot on the agenda.
Actually, this specific thing, I would like to hear from any of you guys on what you guys would like to see, if 7 is good, or 6:30 is better, or 6. Does anyone have any comment? Public comment on time?
7, I think is good. Kind of right smack dab in the middle of the evening.
I would like a little earlier, like 6:30. 6 might be cutting it close for working. Maybe we'll compromise.
Go ahead.
It's been 7 almost always, and it's nice to be done earlier, but for people with young families, it's good to get everybody to supper first. You know, some people don't do much for lunch, so they get home in the evening, and the evening meal's a pretty big deal. If parents gotta skip on an evening meal, and the kids conversely also miss on that meal, I think 7 gives the young families a bigger opportunity in many cases. I can live with whatever time to choose.
I do like the compromise of 6:30. I know I have 3 kids at home too, and I think one of the things too, if we want to allow more public input and times are going to go a little bit later, having that little bit of adjustment might make it easier so we're not getting home to our families really late. Obviously, you guys voted for us to be up here, and we do want to be up here for a reasonable amount of time where we can listen to what you guys have to say. And if we do get more participation from the community, having that a little bit earlier of a start time might help to not get home so late. So I like the idea of 6:30, but I guess it'll be up to everyone here on the council.
I, again, would still prefer 7 PM. I know there's times that I get home about 6 o'clock, and so for me to come in and walk out the door within 15 minutes to see my 2 young kids, it's kind of unfortunate. I don't know everybody else's personal lives and whatnot, but I work in Brainerd, and it's a commute coming home when I do work there. And so having that short time, plus being active in my kids' sports, it'll take me away from further sporting events, further away from my kids. And again, it's just been 7 PM for a number of years. We've tried doing the 6 PM during the summertime, and that really affected me personally. So I personally would like to still see it the 7 o'clock. I think as audience member pointed out, it gives the younger families a little bit more time to be home with the kids. I don't get to tuck them in at bed on these nights, so.
Well, it's a good thing it's only once a month and
That's
not
right.
once a week. So, and again, everyone has a different perspective on it. And so I obviously respect everyone's reasonings for, what they prefer. So do I have a motion for anything, for a time? I mean, how?
Make a motion.
Yeah, do we
Madam
want to
Mayor,
wait?
My recommendation on this item was, I'll take it down if you have some consensus, and then just you can do it all at one motion when
Okay.
you adopt the resolution.
Okay. I would prefer a 6:30 start time.
I'm fine with 6:30 as well. I mean, it's dinner or bedtime. Either way, you're missing part of it or all of it. So, yeah.
I'm fine with 6:30.
There we go.
Right. Next on the second. Do we want to look at times then for, I know Councilman Maroney, you, Safety and Public Works, that's one of yours, and Councilman Scott, and then also Councilman Scott and Councilman Ball, those would be your meetings.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this is a great one to discuss right now because with work schedules and things, it's going to be hard for me to like nail down a specific time unless it's like after 5 o'clock.
Again, these meetings can be whenever you all decide to do them, so they do not have to be during the work day. So they can
Right.
absolutely be after our meetings. And again, yeah, if you don't want to set those times tonight, you don't have to.
Is that something we can work with our counterpart on that committee?
And work with me.
Offline and then, and
Absolutely.
discuss it and then bring it back?
Yeah,
Would that
absolutely.
be all right with you, Madam Mayor?
I feel like, yeah, that would be easier for me.
That
if
way
that's
we
okay
can,
with you.
we don't have to all discuss all of our schedules.
That is totally fine with me. All right, and the next, number 3, one of the reasons why I had brought this up is, you know, we don't have a lot of applicants for boards, right, in Breezy Point. I wish we did. I wish we had more participation from the community on a lot of different things, because there's a lot to get done. And when we have, you know, one opening for the Parks and Rec, and we have 2 applicants who I both spoke with, and I both valued their opinions, and they were both very different opinions on certain issues. And I would prefer to have differences of opinions on these boards, because I don't think that it is healthy to appoint people to boards that all feel the same way. We need to have people who are going to have discussions that are going to be different. That is how we come with better solutions. That is how we work together as a community. So the 2 people that I had spoke to, I didn't feel that I could make a decision on them. Furthermore, if we, let's just say with a disc golf course, right? Or we have a trail, or we have a splash pad, or anything that we're doing from a Parks and Recs perspective, why not grow that board and so that we can have more discussions on how we make our community better? And so that was why I decided to put this on the agenda so that we can have a discussion about that. And so I'm hoping that with that, we can, again, expand participation, because that's really what we should be promoting in the city.
I agree with it. I agree that if we have 3 applicants right now, and we can fill those spots, I say we expand it. It's great to have more public involvement, so I'm for it.
I feel the same.
Not everybody can make it every time, so.
Right.
So, Madam Mayor, my recommendation on this one would be when you adopt this resolution to just not fill that spot now, in that it will take a resolution by the city council to expand the park board from 5 to 7 members, which we will do at February, and then you can appoint, after you adopt that resolution in February, you can appoint those 3 members to the park board at that time formally.
Okay. Do we have to formally vote on anything right now?
Yes, so what we'll need at this point, Madam Mayor and Council, is the adoption of Resolution 3/2023, and I would say with the council meeting time of 6:30 p.m., no set time for the Personnel, Finance, Safety, and Public Works meeting, and no formal appointment to the park board.
Is there a way to do that motion without repeating everything?
Also
you just
move.
Right there, Madam Mayor.
Second.
Councilman Maroney, so moved. Councilman Jensen, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next on the agenda, setting city council retreat, so.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with the new city council, I think it's pertinent for the city council to have an opportunity to kind of sit down in an informal retreat setting and just have a discussion on a big, broad array of kind of what your goals and objectives are as a group, and kind of outside of this more formal setting, allow myself and the staff to kind of present our analysis of what's going on, the things we're seeing, and just have that discussion with the city council. I have reached out to Mayor Dave Bartholomew. He is the mayor of the city of Circle Pines, and until recently actually was an employee of the state of Minnesota and is a professional facilitator and moderator. And I've been in some professional development things with him. He's quite involved with like the League of Minnesota Cities and the Minnesota City County Management Association. And I think he'd be great in just helping facilitate that discussion between council and staff. And so literally what we're looking at, hopefully trying to do is settle down on a date. Since the packet did go out, it was brought to my attention, we were proposing either Friday, March 24th or Saturday, March 25th, that is spring break for the Pequot Lake School District. And so there may be some conflicts with the council on those dates. In my memo, I mentioned that the weekend of March 11 did not work for Mayor Bartholomew. March 18th, I unfortunately will not be available. So really what it comes down to is kind of when do you want to hold this this retreat. You could push it 1 week and look at the weekend of April 1st, March 30th. I could talk to Mayor Bartholomew if he'd be available with that. We could look at doing it March 11th. Unfortunately, that would just mean doing it without Mayor Dave, although I think he would provide a great service to us in that discussion. Or look at holding it earlier in February. I know that Council Member Ball is going to be unavailable for a good part of a month, but I'm unsure if she would be available that early or not. So it really is kind of a discussion of is there a time, does say an April 1st or another time work for the council? Right now, I know I put down kind of a Friday evening or a Saturday morning. It doesn't have to be either one of those. I'm just trying to be cognizant of people's work lives and such and not have to necessarily make people take vacation to participate in this retreat.
Does anyone have any initial comments?
Yeah, I might as well start. Actually, neither the 24th or 25th would work for me. I'm going to be out of state. So that would really
When are you
suggest
gonna be?
what Dave is mentioning of looking at some alternative dates.
Are you back the 31st first?
You
I
back?
would be back, yes.
That was ideal if it works with everybody else's. I thought pushing it back 1 week would work in my schedule.
No, I'm like looking at my schedule too. I know that my daughter, we are going on the spring vacation, so I know that it would have to be either before or after spring vacation that week. Can we table this and talk about it after we all check schedules? Okay.
If the council would like, I can also send out like a doodle poll and just kind of with a bunch of dates and just kind of figure out what works, and then we can kind of set it offline too as well.
I think that would be best.
Want to do that? Okay.
Yeah, and I do feel that it always helps when you can get input from other cities and other mayors on the things that they've done and shouldn't have done, the things that they've learned. I do think that is a critical aspect of how we govern and sharing information. So I definitely want to make sure that it's a day that he can make it. You raised your hand in the back. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Does this qualify as an open meeting violation?
The retreat would not be an open meeting violation as it would be a noticed meeting of the city council.
Okay.
And I would gather that the public would be invited to attend?
All open meetings, the public is invited to attend.
So we'll wait on it. The next one, consideration emergency and inclement weather policy. Administrator Chansky.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is one, obviously, with some recent weather we've had, kind of came to the forefront in that the city currently does not have an emergency and inclement weather policy. To be clear, just to clarify, this is a policy that's kind of an internal organizational policy. This is not a community policy in which the city would be declaring emergencies for the city or the community of Breezy Point. This is a policy really that is intended to, as it says right in the purpose statement of the draft policy, is to identify the procedure for closure of city facilities and the treatment of employee absences from work during emergency and inclement conditions. So this is a determinant of how do we, as an organization, treat emergencies and inclement weather situations. Really what it comes down to is when we have an emergency or inclement weather situations, it's not there are members of our staff that it's just not, they don't need to be here. And I think it's in their best interest not to try to make it in when honestly there really won't be anyone coming in as other people are hunkering down as well. Obviously, there are employees that we will have to come in. Emergency personnel will be required to come in during such an emergency, depending on what that emergency is. So what this policy does before you on it describes what an emergency condition includes. It identifies the difference between non-emergency and emergency personnel, and then talks about how a emergency declaration would be made. That would be a determination by the city administrator, and then directs how employees will be treated during an emergency. In short, if an emergency is declared and city facilities are shut down, non-emergency personnel will be told to either stay home or, if the workday has begun, to go home, and they will be compensated for that day's work. If an emergency declaration is declared, but city facilities remain open, at that point, city employees would have the option, non-emergency personnel would have the option to leave. However, they would be required to utilize accrued vacation, sick, or compensatory time to cover the time away from work. So that is the purpose of this policy. Again, this is not something, oh, it's snowing, we'll shut the city down. It has nothing to do with that. It's more on those extreme conditions where, roads are impassable. Our plow guys are doing their best they can to even try to keep the roads and keep themselves out of ditches. That it's really just in the best interest and safety of our employees to have them stay home and stay safe.
Any discussion?
I can certainly appreciate the reasoning behind establishing some kind of procedure for how the city is going to operate or who's going to be available during situations that might otherwise just be difficult for people to get around. A little concerned, just being a public organization, and the service that's provided by city staff. Just feeling like maybe there needs to be a little more discussion or further definition around who is actually considered emergency versus non-emergency. Not real sure right now the way things are written that it's clear. I wonder if there shouldn't actually be specific city positions identified somehow in the policy. I guess those are just some of my initial thoughts. Ultimately, I wouldn't mind it if this was tabled and referred to the Personnel Committee for more discussion.
Administrator Chansky, do you want to respond? Have you given any thought to?
So this actually policy is actually, the main template from this policy is actually from the city of Duluth. And I actually had some communication with their chief administrative officer on this policy, and this is what they've been using, and they've had seem to have no issues with it. So that's where it came down to. I did reach out to a number of other communities to see what they had, and it's kind of a mixed bag. Some organizations say pretty much doesn't matter what the weather is, we're open 8 to 4, you come to work or you take vacation. Others have more of a set policy like this that says, if you're a finance specialist, you are not public facing, you don't necessarily need to be here, we don't want you to risk yourself. So that's kind of what it came down to. No organization that I saw had it spelled out in their policy of these are the positions. It was kind of, again, part of that being, it could go emergency by emergency and who those people are. Obviously, your police, they're going to be here no matter what. That's their job. City Hall, again, depends on what that emergency is, whether or not certain positions will be required. Even the Public Works, there are some certain situations where they might not even be necessary depending on what the situation is. Most of the time, they will likely be necessary, but That's kind of why it was worded the way it is to give the flexibility of what that emergency is.
And I'll go ahead and respond to that too. I feel like we've hired the city administrator because we trust him to do his job. And so if, Administrator Chansky does feel like it is an emergency and the conditions are bad, I fully trust his decision on whether or not to have people come in, because I would hate for people to come in and something happen.
I have one question. What is the ability of staff to work remotely?
So,
Do they have access to all systems? Can they VPN in?
So we do have the ability to do that. Staff, we don't have like permanent setup at home situations. So if it is a situation where we can look ahead and we can see it's gonna, all forecasts, everyone agrees, we're getting 18 inches of snow in the next 12 hours and it's gonna be heavy and wet, we can plan ahead and absolutely have people take work home. But we kind of have to know that in advance.
Okay.
So in advanced situations, yeah, we're gonna try to allow people to work. So we do answer it short, we do have the ability. It'll be mostly based off of kind of when does that determination get made. If it gets made, if we have enough advanced warning, we'll absolutely have people take their laptops home, assign work that they can get done while they're at home. If it's something that kind of gets decided late, the storm turned and now we're the eye of the storm, well then we might not be able to make that determination.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with the mayor. I think Administrator Chansky does a great job. I don't feel that I would have any concerns with him making the call if there was some sort of emergency as to who can or should not come in.
And the only question I really had was who can determine that, and that's only you, it looks like, for city administrator can only determine the emergency
Correct.
per the policy. In the last 9 months that you've been here, how many times do you think this would have been in effect?
1.
Yep, okay, so.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, my comments and thoughts on this don't have anything to do with trust or a lack thereof of the administrator. It's more of the practical nature of how our city staff and the residents served by a policy as such. And anytime, to me, I can look at people making their own judgment call throughout, it almost feels like that's where things should be. I think most city staff, most people, if conditions are whatever they are that they're being faced with, are going to likely say, I'm not going to work, taking vacation. So it starts me thinking, how is this policy guidance any different in terms of how it's going to guide people otherwise staying home and taking vacation, which is essentially what the policy would provide for them to do. And if there is support for the policy to be put into place, for whatever it's worth, maybe to take some of the heat off of the administrator, I'd almost prefer to see the decision coming from the administrator in consultation with the mayor. I think the mayor, as an elected official of the city and as the head of the city, could probably deflect some frustration that might come from the community in whatever way, when and if that decision's made.
Yeah, and I'll play off of that too. Administrator Chansky and I had a little discussion on this as well, and I'm a big fan of, you hire people to do their job, and if weather, becomes an issue, and they rely on hourly pay as well, I want to make sure that if the weather is that bad, that they're still getting paid at home, and not necessarily taking vacation time, not letting weather be a reason that, they have to try to make the trek or however that is. And so I really do feel that, like you said, 9 months, it's happened one time, so this isn't something that's, well, I guess, don't count your chickens before they hatch, it could happen more. But I do feel like at least this gives us, the ability to call an emergency if we need to, and people can stay home. So.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept the written policy as written right now.
I'll second.
All right, Councilman Maroney made a motion, Councilwoman Ball, second. All in favor?
You can call
Any
discussion
discussion?
first.
Any discussion?
None for me.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, next one. Discussion on the short-term rental water testing. Go ahead, Administrator Chansky.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the city's new short-term rental ordinance, which is Chapter 115 of the city code, went into effect on January 1st per the city council's desire. Staff, we identified, got a list from Crow Wing County beginning of December of all currently licensed short-term rentals by Crow Wing County as of the beginning of December. And then we sent out packets to all of them that included kind of a letter from myself as to what has transpired, a copy of the short-term rental application form, as well as the short-term rental ordinance, to kind of give them a kind of head start on the application process prior to the application going fully public on January 1st. During that process, it came out that in the city's ordinance, the city lists a number of substances that need to be tested for in well water, some annually and some every 10 years. Two of those are sulfate and mercury. We found out is one from some applicants who first identified that they were having trouble finding someone that would test for those. And then we were even contacted by AW Research Laboratories in Brainerd. They're actually kind of the primary provider of this service in the Brainerd Lakes area, as well as most of central Minnesota. That they just straight up reached out to us and said, hey, FYI, we don't provide well water testing for sulfate and mercury. As a result of this, we started looking, and Assistant Administrator Ike started doing some research, looking at laboratories throughout the state of Minnesota, went on to the Minnesota Department of Health at all the licensed laboratories of the Department of Health. And of those laboratories, none of them provide sulfate and mercury testing for a residential purpose. There's one out of Minneapolis that does it, but it came clear once we started researching that lab, they're an industrial lab, so they would not provide it on a residential basis. Where did that bring us? It comes down to this, is that you're looking at the letter of the law. The ordinance says that people must provide a water test that tests for sulfate and mercury levels. So as the ordinance is currently written, technically no short-term rental licenses should be issued without those tests. That would mean someone would have to try to essentially find a lab somewhere, likely not in the state of Minnesota, as at least there's not a lab that is licensed by the Department of Health that tests for that, before we can issue their license. We have started to get some applications in from that initial mailing. Right now, first of all, they started arriving last week. We were just sitting on those until January 1st, and before we can have this discussion. So really, we're coming before you, just get some direction as how you want us to proceed. Really, the options is leave it as written, and then applicants would have to just figure it out. Or to our recommendation, other recommendation would be to just remove sulfate and mercury from testing requirements. That would require a ordinance amendment that could come before the council in February for that change. If the council wants to make that ordinance amendment, the only other question we would ask from you is how do you want us to address all the current short-term rental applications that are coming in between now and that action in February. So that's where we're at, Madam Mayor.
Any initial thoughts?
I have a question. When Crow Wing County was issuing the short-term rental licenses, did they have that requirement, or did they waive it?
They had a water testing requirement, but it did not have all the elements ours does. When the city council was reviewing this, they saw fit to add a number of elements to that water testing at that time. So I think I think they had 2 items. The 2 annual ones were the same, and then they had one for a 10-year, and the council added a couple more items to the 10-year that they felt lead, manganese, and the sulfate and the mercury. And at that time, we just did not know that these labs didn't test for it.
So if a resident had new home construction, they put in a well, do we have requirements?
The state of Minnesota and Crow Wing County do. Crow Wing County does that for us. And
they don't
mercury and sulfate is not one of those requirements.
I will say even getting a VA loan, right? RD loan, any kind of government loan, they do not ask for those to be tested. So I think it's unreasonable for us to ask for that to be tested as well.
I would agree.
I agree as well, yeah.
I agree.
I wonder, you know, and this isn't me trying to suggest there are going to be other things coming up as a surprise within the whole area of short-term rentals, but it does seem like this is, you know, yet again, among other things that have changed since short-term rentals have been discussed since the city put the ordinance in place. And I'm going to freely confess, I don't have a lot of background about what's taken place and the impact on Breezy Point as a city with the short-term rental ordinance. But I do wonder if it is time potentially to consider a moratorium, to allow the council to maybe consider pulling together a group of residents or whomever would want to serve and have interest and can give more consideration to how the short-term rental ordinance ultimately applies to the city of Breezy Point. Maybe there's been far more conversation and evaluation of the ordinance than what I'm aware of. It's entirely possible. But I do wonder what it would hurt. And I'd be interested in the administrator's thoughts on, are we at a place at this point where the council could take up a moratorium on short-term rentals?
So I would say that obviously that's a decision the council can make at any time it wants. Obviously, this ordinance just went into effect. This is something that popped up through this process. Yes, we don't know what other leaks this ordinance might have, and it probably does have other leaks. Obviously, until this ship starts to sail, we won't know what those leaks are. So we could look at trying to patch things, but again, my personal opinion is until we know, this ship really starts to sail, we won't know exactly what those leaks are. That being said, obviously this has been a long discussion. I know even the council has had differing opinions on the short-term rental issue. The council obviously can, if it wanted to, could put in place a moratorium. I would say if you're going to do that, I would, probably now in January is better than in July. And I would obviously refer, part of that would refer, I would conference with the city attorney, just want to know what would the potential impacts and legal impacts of doing a moratorium, as there are already short-term rentals out there, and what that potentially, how that would affect them, and then what position that could potentially put the city in. So I would definitely confer also with the city attorney before the city council would to do that. Just so you know what a process for that would look like, putting a moratorium in place is done through an interim ordinance. So an interim ordinance, obviously, is an ordinance that lasts for a certain period of time. State statute governs on how long you can put moratoriums in place. You have to have a reason for a moratorium, exactly study an issue, things like that. So if the council wanted to do that, we could absolutely, look into that and bring that as an option back before the council at a future meeting.
And to go back to your discussion, Brad, and whether or not you've reviewed tapes or not, I'm probably the only one that was on the past council that was against the short-term ordinance that we passed through. But we did have, I believe, 3 public hearings on short-term rentals. They were held, I believe, in April, July, and August, if my memory serves correctly, but we spread it out throughout the year to allow citizens that may not be full-time residents to come in, give their speech, express their concerns for, against it. So we have had a number of public comment options on it. So just to fill you in a little bit on that one. When it comes to as what it's written here, I agreed with what the consensus was about removing these requirements. But
Yeah, I guess I'm just picking up on the fact that there's, very divergent thoughts and impacts on short-term rentals in the community. And I wonder, I don't have a strong position one way or another on it, but if spending some more time, if looking into things further, if landing on a different application of this ordinance throughout in the city may not be worthwhile. Those are some of my thoughts, I guess, behind, to me, why there may be some benefit in taking up a moratorium on this.
Can we add anything?
You have a question?
You might want to consider
Madam?
your 1 hour time frame.
Madam, as a mayor, if you're going to have further discussion on this issue, I just request we take our quick break.
Yep.
2-minute break to
Perfect.
reset the recording.
Perfect. Should I-
You're going to call a recess.
oh, I'm going to call a recess.